The settlers called her too old. At 45, Sarah McKinnon found herself alone on the frontier, a widow cast aside by a community that saw no value in aging women. No food, no shelter, no hope. That's what they thought. But they didn't count on Chief James Blackwood, the wealthiest rancher in 3 territories, seeing what they couldn't, the fire that still burned in her heart. While others turned their backs, he saw beyond her years, to the spirit of a true frontier woman. When he found her struggling to survive, he made a decision that would shock the entire territory. He didn't just save her life, he made her his wife. But in a land where age determines worth and tradition rules with an iron fist, could their forbidden love survive the judgment of 2 worlds? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah McKinnon's calloused fingers traced the worn leather of her championship saddle, the only piece of glory she'd managed to keep. Dawn painted the abandoned homestead in shades of gold, but there was no beauty in it for her anymore. The morning chill bit through her threadbare shawl as she studied the empty grain bin, calculating how many days she had left. 3, maybe 4 if she stretched it. The saddle's silver conchos caught the early light, each one earned in barrel racing competitions across the territory. 20 years ago they'd called her the Prairie Lightning. Now they called her nothing at all. The settlement's judgment had been swift and merciless. A widow at 45 was just another mouth to feed, a burden on their struggling community. She lifted the saddle onto its stand, her arms trembling with the effort. The hunger was getting worse. Last week, she'd tried trading her wedding ring for supplies at Hanson's general store, but Mary Hanson had turned her away with pity in her eyes and judgment in her whispers. Too old to remarry, too proud to leave, she'd heard them say. The words followed her like shadows, but they didn't understand. This land was all she had left of Thomas. Her late husband had poured his heart into every fence post, every ploughed furrow. Leaving meant letting him die a second time. A distant whinny drew her attention. Through the barn's broken window, she spotted riders approaching. Jensen and his boys, most likely. They'd been circling her property like vultures since Thomas's death, waiting for her to give up or give in. Sarah's hand instinctively went to the silver locket at her neck, the one containing Thomas's photograph and a lock of their stillborn daughter's hair. She squared her shoulders, ignoring the weakness in her legs. The Jensens could threaten all they wanted, but she'd die before. She'd let them take what was hers. Moving quickly, she retrieved Thomas's old rifle from behind the saddle rack. It only had 3 shells left, but sometimes the sight of a gun was enough. The sound of hooves grew closer. Sarah positioned herself in the barn doorway, rifle ready, but not raised. The morning sun struck her face, and she lifted her chin, refusing to shade her eyes. Let them see her clearly. Let them remember that Sarah McKinnon never backed down, not in the arena, not now. "Morning, Widow McKinnon," Jensen called out, his tone falsely pleasant. His 3 sons flanked him, all wearing the same predatory smirk. "Been thinking about our offer?" "Still not for sale, Jensen," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite her empty stomach. "Not today, not ever." Jensen spat into the dust. "Ain't gonna be your choice much longer. Winter's coming. You got no crops in the ground, no help coming. Way I see it, you're just taking up good land that could feed a proper family." The words stung, but Sarah didn't flinch. "This is my land. Sam Jensen, I've got the deed to prove it." "Deed ain't worth much when you can't work the land," the oldest Jensen boy sneered. "Face facts, widow. You're too old to handle a spread like this. Best sell now while you can still get a fair price." Fair price. Sarah almost laughed. They'd offered her a quarter of what the land was worth, knowing she was desperate. But they didn't know everything. They didn't know about the small pouch of seed corn she'd saved, or the wild herbs she'd learned to eat, or the hidden spring on the north end of her property that never ran dry. "I appreciate your concern," she said, letting her hand rest meaningfully on the rifle, "but my answer's still no." Jensen's face darkened. "Have it your way, then. But when you're eating shoe leather come winter, don't come crawling to town for help. Ain't nobody there wants to waste good food on a dried-up old woman. They wheeled their horses around, kicking up dust as they rode away. Only when they were out of sight did Sarah let herself sag against the doorframe, the rifle suddenly, heavy in her hands. Her vision swam, black spots dancing at the edges. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten more than a handful of wild berries and a cup of herb tea, but she wouldn't give in. Not to hunger, not to the Jensens, not to the whispers that said a woman her age should quietly fade away. Sarah straightened up, looking at the saddle that held so many memories of triumph. She was still the same woman who'd ridden through fire to win the territorial championship. Age hadn't changed. It had only made her stronger, if only she could make them see it. Chief James Blackwood pulled his horse to a stop at the crest of the hill, the eagle feather in his hat catching the late afternoon light. Below him stretched the disputed territory between tribal lands and settler claims. His trained eye caught something unusual. Smoke, too thin to be a cook fire, rising from the abandoned McKinnon place. The old medicine woman's words echoed in his mind. The eagle feather your father gave you carries wisdom, James. It will guide you to those who need you most. He'd worn it every day since becoming chief, though many in the tribe still questioned. A leader who walked in both worlds, educated in Eastern schools, but devoted to tribal traditions. His horse picked its way down the slope, hooves sure on the rocky ground. As he drew closer, the scent of burning sage reached him. Not a house fire then. Someone was trying to smoke out prairie rats for food. Desperate work. He found her behind the barn, kneeling over a small sage fire, her shaking hands trying to guide the smoke into a burrow. She didn't hear his approach, too focused on her task. Even from behind, he could see how her clothes hung loose on her frame. "There's an easier way," he said softly, not wanting to startle her. She whirled, rising too quickly. Her face went pale, and she swayed on her feet. James dismounted in one fluid motion, crossing the distance between them, just in time to catch her arm as she stumbled. "Mrs. McKinnon," he said, recognizing her from the few times they'd crossed paths in town. She'd been fuller-faced then, her eyes not so hollow. "Chief Blackwood." She tried to pull away, to stand straight, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. "I'm fine, just stood up too fast." He didn't release her arm. "When did you last eat?" Pride warred with desperation in her expression. "I've got food," she said. "The rats are too lean to be worth the effort." He studied her face. The settlers called her old, but he saw only character in the lines around her eyes, strength in the set of her jaw. "My people have better ways to find meat. I don't need charity," she said, but her voice wavered. James released her arm once he was sure she could stand. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a package wrapped in corn leaves. "Good thing this isn't charity. This is payment." "Payment? For what?" "Information." He unwrapped the corn leaves, revealing dried buffalo meat and corn cakes. "The Jensen gang has been causing trouble along our borders, stealing cattle, harassing our hunters. I hear they've been sniffing around your land, too." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "You want me to spy on them? I want you to tell me what you already know." He held out the food. "Unless you'd rather." "On catch rats." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "They were here this morning, making threats, trying to force me to sell." She took the package, her fingers trembling slightly. "They've been watching the north border of your territory. I've seen them riding out before dawn, coming back with extra horses." James nodded, just as he'd suspected. "Good information, worth trading for." He turned to his horse and pulled out a second package. "I'll need regular reports." Sarah looked at the food in her hands, then back at him. "Why are you really doing this?" He touched the eagle feather in his hat. "Because I know what it's like to be judged for who you are, rather than what you can do." His eyes met hers. "The settlers think you're too old to matter, the same way some of my people think I'm too educated to be a real chief. And what do you think?" "I think anyone who can survive out here alone for 3 months has strength worth respecting." He mounted his horse. I'll be back in 3 days. Try to notice which direction the Jensens ride out. She nodded, clutching the precious packages. Chief Blackwood. He turned in his saddle. Thank you, she said, for seeing me. James, he corrected. My name is James. He rode away, but not before he saw her smile. A real one this time, transforming her whole face. The eagle feather stirred in the evening breeze, and he smiled too. His father's wisdom had led him true once again. Sarah woke to the scent of sage and sweetgrass. Unfamiliar walls of tanned hide surrounded her, and a woman with silver-streaked braids bent over a small fire, stirring something in a clay pot. The medicine bundle hanging above her head swayed, gently in the breeze that filtered through the smoke hole. You're safe, the woman said without turning. I'm Mary Blackhawk, the chief's sister. She ladled something from the pot into a wooden bowl. 3 days you've slept. The fever almost took you. Sarah tried to sit up, but her body felt impossibly heavy. My land is being watched by our warriors. Mary brought the bowl over. James found you collapsed in your barn. You should have told him how sick you were. The memory came back in fragments. James arriving for his regular intelligence meeting, the world spinning, the ground rushing up to meet her. She remembered his strong arms lifting her, his voice speaking words she couldn't understand. The tribe won't like this, Sarah whispered, accepting the bowl of rich bone broth. Me being here? Mary's dark eyes crinkled with amusement. The tribe doesn't like many things my brother does, but they respect him. He sees with different eyes. She touched the medicine bundle. These herbs were gathered by our grandmother. She too walked between worlds, healing both our people and the settlers. James says you have her spirit. Sarah sipped the broth, warmth spreading through her hollow spaces. Outside, she could hear children playing, women talking, the ordinary sounds of community that she'd been starved for, as surely as she'd been starved for food. A shadow fell across the teepee entrance. James ducked inside, carrying Sarah's worn saddle. I thought you might want this, he said, setting it carefully beside her bed. And these. He pulled out her silver locket and a small pouch. The seeds she'd saved. You went back. Her throat tightened with emotion. The Jensens. We're watching your place, he said, settling cross-legged near the fire. But they didn't see us. Mouse that walked silent lived up to his name. Mary snorted. My brother gives his warriors such strange names. She handed him a bowl of broth. Then again they say his spirit name, thunder speaking softly, makes no sense either. Sarah looked between them, seeing the easy affection, the years of shared understanding. Why are you helping me? She asked. Really? James was quiet for a long moment, staring into his bowl. When my father died, the tribal council said I was too young to be chief, too educated in white ways, not traditional enough. He met her eyes. But age isn't wisdom, and tradition isn't just doing things the old way. It's about honoring the spirit of our teachings. And what do your teachings say about taking in a white woman? Sarah asked. They say that strength recognizes strength. Mary stood gathering her herbs. They say that those who judge by the surface miss the deep waters beneath. She touched Sarah's shoulder gently. Rest. Heal. The rest will come in its time. As Mary left, James moved closer to Sarah's bedside. The Jensens filed a claim on your land, he said quietly. They're saying you abandoned it. Sarah's hands clenched around the bowl. I know. He touched the eagle feather in his hat. That's why I filed a counterclaim. As chief, I have territorial rights. They can't take your land while it's under tribal protection. She stared at him, understanding the magnitude of what he'd done. The settlers will be furious. Your own people will adapt. His smile held a hint of mischief. They adapted to my Eastern education. They adapted to my trading posts. They'll adapt to this too. And what is this exactly? Sarah asked, her heart beating faster. James stood, his presence filling the teepee. For now it's sanctuary. What it becomes... He paused at the entrance, looking back at her. That depends on how well you ride. Ride when you're stronger. I hear you were called Prairie Lightning once. His eyes sparkled. I'd like to see if you live up to the name." After he left, Sarah ran her hands over her old saddle, feeling the memories in the worn leather. For the first time in months, she felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. Hope. The town notice board had drawn a crowd. Sarah stood at its edge, her newly regained strength evident in her straight spine and steady gaze. The posted notice made her blood run cold. Emergency town meeting. Subject, tribal interference, in settler affairs. "Well, if it ain't the chief's pet squaw," Sam Jensen's voice cut through the murmuring crowd. He stepped forward, thumbs hooked in his belt. "Come to see how civilized folks handle their business?" Sarah met his gaze calmly, though her heart raced. 2 weeks of proper food and rest at the tribal camp had restored more than her health. It had rekindled her fire. "Seems to me, Sam, that civilized folks don't resort to land theft and false claims." Whispers rippled through the gathering. Mary Hansen pushed forward, her face pinched with disapproval. "Is it true, then? You're living with the savages?" "I'm accepting the protection of Chief Blackwood while my legal rights are being violated," Sarah corrected, her voice carrying. "The same chief who's kept peace in this territory for 5 years. The same chief who helped this town survive last winter's blizzard. The same chief who's been seeing an awful lot of you," someone called out. Snickers followed. Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she held her ground. Yesterday, James had taught her to shoot arrows from horseback, his hands gentle on her arms as he corrected her form. The memory gave her strength. "You all knew me when Thomas was alive," she said. "Knew him too. He believed in building bridges, not walls. That's why he traded fairly with the tribe, why he taught their children about crop rotation. And look where that got him," Jensen spat. "Dead in a ditch from fever, leaving his widow to turn Indian." Sarah's hand flew to her locket. "Thomas would be proud that I'm surviving, that I'm not letting bullies steal what we built." "Proud?" Jensen laughed harshly. "Your husband would be rolling in his grave if he knew you were warming a savage's bed." The slap echoed across the square. Jensen staggered back, hand to his reddening cheek. Sarah stood trembling, her palm stinging. "My relationship with Chief Blackwood is no one's concern but our own," she said quietly. "But since you bring it up, he's shown more civilization in his little finger than you have in your entire body, Sam Jensen." "That's enough," the Reverend pushed through the crowd. "Mrs. McKinnon, this is unseemly. Come to services on Sunday. Repent. There's still time to return to your people." "My people?" Sarah looked around at the faces she'd known for years. "My people left me to starve when I needed them most. The only ones who showed true Christian charity were those you call savages." She turned to go, but Mary Hansen caught her arm. "Sarah, please, we were friends once. Don't throw everything away for this infatuation. You're too old for such foolishness." Sarah gently removed Mary's hand. "Age has nothing to do with it, Mary. This is about justice, about seeing people for who they are, not what we fear them to be." She walked away, head high, but her composure cracked when she reached the edge of town. There stood James, his face unreadable. How much had he heard? "They fear what they don't understand," he said softly. "Your people must think the same of me." James touched the eagle feather in his hat. "Some do. The tribal council met this morning. They say I'm betraying our traditions by harboring you, by—" He paused. "By feeling what I feel." Sarah's heart skipped. "And what do you feel?" Instead of answering, he mounted his horse and held out his hand to her. "Come, there's something I want to show you." She took his hand, letting him pull her up behind him. They rode in silence through the golden afternoon, up into the hills overlooking both the town and the tribal lands. Finally, James stopped at a high point where an ancient oak spread its branches. "My father brought me here when I became chief," he said. "He told me to look down at the valley and see not 2 separate peoples, but one land that needed all its children." He turned to "Now face her. I see no shame in what I feel, Sarah McKinnon, only hope for what could be." The breeze carried the scent of sage and prairie grass, and Sarah felt something inside her shift, like a door opening to light. "Show me how to say hope in your language," she whispered. And as the sun set over the valley, he did. The beaded bracelet caught the firelight as Sarah ground corn with the other women. Mary Blackhawk had given it to her that morning, a simple band of blue and white beads that meant more than any diamond. "Your hands know the rhythm now," Running Brook said approvingly in halting English. The young woman had been teaching Sarah their language, trading words over daily tasks. "You grind like my grandmother." "Wapila," Sarah replied. "Thank you," and the other women smiled. 2 weeks of living among them had taught her more than just words. She'd learned to read the meanings in silences, the messages in small gestures. Like the bracelet, Mary hadn't explained its significance, but Sarah had seen similar ones, worn by women accepted into the tribe through marriage. The thought made her pulse quicken. "Tell us again about the barrel racing," Swift Deer's daughter called out. At 12, she was fascinated by Sarah's past victories. "About how you rode through fire." "Swift Deer," her mother scolded. "The elder women are working." Sarah looked up from her grinding stone. "Elder women?" she teased in their language. "I thought I was too young to have earned such respect." The women laughed, and Running Brook touched the bracelet on Sarah's wrist. "Age is not years," she said. "Age is wisdom. You have known both summer and winter in your heart. This makes you elder." The words struck Sarah deeply. Here, among people who had every reason to reject her, she'd found acceptance based not on her years, but on her character. A shadow fell across their workspace. James stood in the teepee entrance, his presence commanding yet gentle. "May I borrow our corn grinder?" he asked formally, in his own language. "There are matters we must discuss." The women exchanged knowing looks that transcended any cultural barrier. Sarah felt her cheeks warm as she rose, dusting cornmeal from her skirts. James led her to the river's edge, where willows provided privacy from curious eyes. He carried a small parfleche, a rawhide case decorated with geometric designs. "The tribal council has concerns," he said without preamble. Sarah's heart sank. "About me, about us." He opened the parfleche, removing a bundle wrapped in soft hide. "They say a chief must think of his people first, that personal feelings must bow to tradition." "I understand," Sarah said softly, though her chest ached. "I should go—" "No." James unwrapped the bundle, revealing a beautifully beaded dress. "You misunderstand. They say if I wish to court you, I must do it properly, according to all the old ways." Sarah stared at the dress, hope blooming in her heart. "Court me, unless," he said carefully, "you find the idea of being courted by an Indian chief too scandalous for a proper white woman." There was uncertainty beneath his teasing tone. Sarah reached out, touching the intricate beadwork. "I stopped being proper the day I slapped Sam Jensen," she said, "though I'm not sure I know your courting customs." James smiled, the warmth of it reaching his eyes. "First there is the gift of clothing, to show I can provide. Then, if the woman accepts, she must demonstrate her skills, riding, cooking, crafting." "I'm a fair hand with horses," Sarah said, remembering their rides together, the way he'd watched her master shooting from horseback. "More than fair." He laid the dress across a fallen log. "Then comes the hard part. The suitor must prove his worth through acts of service to the woman's family." Sarah's hand went to her locket. "My family is gone." "No." James took her hands in his. "Your family is the land you protect, the memory you honor. I will serve those." He paused. "If you accept." Sarah looked at their joined hands, his darker, stronger ones encompassing her work-roughened fingers. "The settlers will never accept this. I'm not asking them." His thumbs traced circles on her palms. "I'm asking you." A breeze stirred the willows, carrying the scent of sage and summer grass. In the distance, children played, women sang, life went on in its ancient rhythms. Sarah thought of her old life, of Thomas, of all the changes that had brought her here. "Teach me," she said finally. How to say yes in your language. James's smile was brighter than the sun on water. He spoke the word softly, and Sarah repeated it, sealing a promise that would change everything. Behind them, hidden by the willows, Mary Blackhawk smiled and withdrew silently. The eagle feather had guided her brother well. Thunder rolled across the prairie as Sarah clutched her property deed, the paper yellowed, but still legally binding. Through the window of the territory's land office, she watched storm clouds gather, nature matching her mood. "This is highly irregular," the clerk muttered, adjusting his wire-rimmed spectacles as he examined the documents spread across his desk. "Highly irregular indeed." James stood beside Sarah, his presence steady as a mountain. He'd worn his finest Western suit. Today, though the eagle feather remained in his hat, a reminder of who he was, what he represented. "The law is quite clear, Mr. Peterson," James said, his educated tone making the clerk squirm. "As chief of the territory's recognized tribal authority, I have the right to file protective claims on threatened properties within our historical borders. But this is settler land, which overlaps with traditional tribal hunting grounds," James interrupted smoothly. "Your own government's treaties acknowledge our right to protect such territories." Sarah stepped forward, laying Thomas's original survey maps on the desk. "My husband worked with the tribe to establish fair boundaries. These documents prove it." Peterson frowned at the maps. "The Jensen's claim cites abandonment." "I was never gone more than a week," Sarah said firmly, "and only then because I was deathly ill and under tribal medical care. That hardly constitutes abandonment under territorial law." A commotion outside drew their attention. Sam Jensen and his boys were approaching the land office, their faces dark as the gathering. "Storm, you can't let them do this, Peterson," Jensen burst in, ignoring proper protocol. "It ain't natural, letting Indians claim authority over white folks' land." "The only thing unnatural here," James said calmly, "is attempting to steal a widow's property through false claims." Lightning flashed, illuminating the scene. Jensen's rage, Peterson's discomfort, James's quiet strength, and Sarah standing tall between two worlds, refusing to be bowed. "This ain't about the land," Jensen spat. "This is about you two making a mockery of decent society, living together, carrying on like two people who respect each other," Sarah cut in. "Like a man and woman courting properly according to traditions older than this territory." The clerk cleared his throat. "There are precedents. The Morrison case in 42, the tribal protection claim was upheld." "Morrison wasn't sleeping with the savages," Jensen's eldest son shouted. James moved faster than seemed possible, his hand catching Jensen Jr.'s collar before the young man could reach Sarah. "Choose your next words carefully," he said softly. "Very carefully." Thunder crashed overhead. Peterson looked at the documentation again, then at the growing crowd outside his window. Finally, he reached for his official stamp. "The protective claim is legally sound," he announced. "Mrs. McKinnon's property remains hers, under joint tribal protection." The stamp came down with finality. "Good day, gentlemen, ma'am." Jensen's face purpled. "This ain't over. The governor will receive a full report of your attempted land theft," James said, "along with evidence of your cattle rustling along tribal borders. Would you like to continue this discussion?" The Jensens backed down, but Sam's parting glare promised trouble. As they left the land office, the storm broke, rain sluicing down in sheets. Sarah gripped her deed and map case tight. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." James touched her elbow gently. "I protect what I love," he said. Then, realizing what he'd admitted, he stilled. Sarah's heart leapt. "What you love!" Their eyes met as lightning split the sky again. Around them, townspeople hurried for shelter, trying not to stare at the unprecedented sight. A tribal chief and a settler widow standing together in the rain, looking at each other like they'd just discovered gold. "Yes," James said simply, "what I love." Sarah reached up and touched the eagle feather in his hat, then let her hand drift to his cheek. "Good," she whispered, because I think I love what I'm protecting too." The rain poured down, but neither of them moved to seek shelter. Some moments were worth getting wet for. The silver ring caught the sunset's light, its unique design telling a story all its own. Traditional tribal patterns flowed into Western scrollwork, two cultures meeting in precious metal. Sarah held it carefully, aware of the silence that had fallen over the tribal council gathering. "This has never been done," Elder Running Horse said, his weathered face unreadable. "A chief taking a white woman as wife. Many things we do now were never done before," James replied in their language, which Sarah was beginning to understand. The trading posts, the shared hunting grounds, the peace with settlers. "Those don't change blood," another elder argued. "Children of this union will be strong," Mary Blackhawk interrupted, standing beside her brother. "Like river and rain joining to make floods, like prairie and forest meeting to make new hunting grounds." Sarah waited, the ring warm in her palm. James had presented it to her privately first, at dawn by the river, where they'd first spoken of courtship. Now came the harder part, gaining the tribe's blessing. She stood, her voice clear in their language. "I come before you not as a settler seeking advantage, but as a woman who has found her heart's home. I offer my strength, my skills, my loyalty to the people who showed me kindness when my own turned away." Running Horse leaned forward. "You would give up settler ways?" "I would take the best of both worlds," Sarah answered, "as your chief does. As many of you do when you trade at posts, when you send children to learn reading, when you adapt to survive." A murmur ran through the gathering. James stepped forward, taking Sarah's hand. "I ask the council's blessing, but I do not require it. I am chief. I have proven my wisdom in leading our people to prosperity. Now I choose a woman who will help build bridges between worlds." "And what of your land?" Running Horse asked Sarah. "The property you fought to keep? It will become tribal land through marriage," she said, "but worked in both ways, crops and grazing, settler methods and tribal wisdom combined. A place where both peoples can learn from each other." Mary touched the beaded bracelet on Sarah's wrist. "She has learned our ways, speaks our words, respects our customs. She has earned the right to be called sister." The council withdrew to deliberate, leaving Sarah and James standing beneath the evening sky. His thumb traced circles on her palm, a gesture that had become precious to her. "Whatever they decide," he said softly, "my heart is set." Sarah squeezed his hand. "The settlers will be worse. There may be violence. Let them come." His voice held steel. "I didn't survive 3 wars to fear small men with small minds." The council returned as the first stars appeared. Running Horse's face was solemn, but his eyes held a glimmer of something like hope. "We have decided," he announced. "The union will be recognized with conditions. The children must learn our ways, our stories, our language. The land must be shared as promised. And you, Sarah McKinnon, must take a tribal name." James's hand tightened on hers. This was more than they'd hoped for. "What name?" Sarah asked. Mary stepped forward. "We have chosen Dawn-bearing Light, for you bring new day to old ways." Tears pricked Sarah's eyes as James slipped the ring onto her finger. Its weight felt right, felt true. "There is one more thing," Running Horse said. "A test. The tribe must see you ride together as equals before the ceremony can be performed. The Summer Horse Festival approaches. You will race as one." Sarah's heart leaped. To race again, to feel that perfect partnership of horse and rider. She looked at James and saw her own joy mirrored there. "We accept," they said together. Later, by the council fire, James held her close. "Are you ready for what's coming? The settlers will try to stop this." Sarah touched the ring, then her locket, past and future combined. "Let them try. I found something worth fighting for." Above them, stars wheeled in ancient patterns, watching as 2 worlds moved closer to becoming one. The wedding blanket spread across Mary's lap, its patterns telling a story never before woven. Traditional tribal symbols flowed into settler designs, horseshoes, crosses, and prairie flowers mingling with sacred geometries. Like the silver ring, it spoke of two worlds meeting, but not everyone saw its beauty. Blasphemy, the Reverend had called it when Sarah showed him the design, a mockery of Christian marriage. Now, as Mary worked the final beading, Sarah watched. Angry torchlights approached the tribal camp. The settlers had been growing bolder since the announcement, their threats escalating from whispers to shouts. "They come to make trouble," Running Brook said, her fingers never pausing in their work on the blanket's edge. "Like coyotes, they are braver in packs." James emerged from his teepee, wearing the chief's formal regalia, but carrying his army revolver. Behind him, warriors melted out of the shadows, armed but disciplined. "Stay back," he told Sarah, but she was already moving to stand beside him. "My people, my responsibility too," she said in his language. Sam Jensen led the mob, torch raised high. "This ends tonight, Chief. You can't marry her." "Says who?" Sarah's voice cut through the tension. "I'm a free woman. He's a free man." "You're a white woman," Jensen spat, "and no white woman's going to birth savage babies in this territory." James's hand tightened on his gun, but Sarah touched his arm. She stepped forward into the torchlight. "Is that what you're afraid of, Sam? Children who might bridge our worlds? Or is it that I've found happiness after you all left me to die?" "We're protecting you from yourself," Mary Hansen called from the crowd. "This isn't natural." "Natural," Sarah laughed. "Like watching a widow starve was natural. Like stealing. Her land was natural." She gestured to the camp around them. "These savages showed more Christian charity than any of you." The wedding blanket caught the firelight as Mary and the other women gathered behind Sarah, holding it like a banner. Its blended patterns seemed to shimmer, challenging the mob's hatred with beauty. "The territory governor will hear about this," Jensen threatened. "There are laws which protect my right to marry whom I choose," Sarah finished. "The same. Laws that protected my property from theft. Or shall we discuss your other activities, the missing cattle, the burned fence posts?" Jensen's face darkened, but uncertainty rippled through his followers. They hadn't counted on resistance, on quiet strength backed by law and love. "Think carefully," James said softly, his educated tones carrying clear authority. "About what? You do next. The army knows me, the territorial courts know me, and they know you." Lightning flickered in the distance, nature's warning. The mob shifted, torches wavering. "You're dead to us," Jensen said finally. "Both of you." But he backed away, his followers trailing behind like shadows fleeing dawn. Sarah's hands shook as the last torch disappeared. James pulled her close, his heart beating strong against her back. "You faced them well," he murmured. "Dawn, bearing light." Indeed. Mary brought the wedding blanket forward. "Look," she said. "The pattern is complete." In the fading torchlight, Sarah saw what the women had added during the confrontation, a ring of unity symbols, settler crosses linked with tribal protection signs, forming an unbroken circle. "Even hatred can inspire beauty," Running Brook said. "Touching the new pattern, see how the anger made us finish with stronger designs." Sarah traced the interconnected symbols. "Like us," she said, "stronger together than apart." That night, unable to sleep, Sarah rode out to her old homestead. James found her there, sitting on the porch steps where she'd once faced starvation. "Having doubts?" he asked, settling beside her. "No." She leaned into his strength, remembering. "I was dying here not just in body, but in spirit. Now," she touched her ring, "now I'm more alive than I've ever been." "Good." He pulled her to her feet. "Because tomorrow we start practicing for the horse festival." "Think you can keep up with a chief?" Sarah's laugh rang across the prairie. "Think you can catch prairie lightning, Chief?" They rode back together under stars that had witnessed countless changes, countless barriers broken, countless loves triumphant. The wedding blanket waited in Mary's teepee, its blended patterns a prophecy of what could be. Dawn painted the sky in shades of promise as Sarah donned her ceremonial dress, a masterpiece of two traditions. Beaded buckskin flowed into white settler's lace, while her mother's pearls nestled against tribal turquoise. In her silver locket, she'd added a warrior's braid of James's hair alongside Thomas's picture, past and future joined. "The horses are ready," Mary said, adjusting Sarah's dress. "But there's something you should see." At the ceremony grounds, Sarah stopped short. Alongside the tribal members in their finest regalia stood a handful of settlers, Thomas's old trading partners, families who'd survived the blizzard thanks to James's help, even Peterson from the land office. And there, separate from the others but undeniably present, stood Mary Hanson, clutching a worn hymnal. "I was wrong," Mary said when Sarah approached. "About age, about love, about everything. Thomas would be proud of you, Sarah, of who you've become." Before Sarah could respond, drums began their sacred rhythm. James appeared on horseback, magnificent in his chief's regalia, the eagle feather proud in his hair. Two horses waited for them, one with a tribal saddle, one with Sarah's old barrel, racing gear. "First," Running Horse announced, "they must prove their unity in the old way." Sarah mounted smoothly, muscle memory replacing nerves. The course before them was challenging, weaving through obstacles, jumping barriers, and finally racing together across open prairie. James caught her eye. In his gaze, she saw not just love, but absolute trust in her skill, her strength, her heart. They rode as one. Where James's horse jumped, Sarah's followed. When Sarah turned, James matched her motion. Their horses moved like twin spirits across the land, neither leading nor following, but dancing together in perfect harmony. "Look," someone whispered, "the sun!" Through breaking clouds, a single ray illuminated them as they crossed the finish. Lined together, even Running Horse smiled. "The spirits approve," he said. "Now comes the binding." They dismounted at the sacred circle where both traditions would speak. Mary Hanson stepped forward first, opening her hymnal. "Love is patient. Love is kind," she read, her voice trembling. "It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres." Running Horse took up the ritual next, speaking in his language while Mary Blackhawk translated, "Two streams join to make a mighty river. Two winds meet to make a stronger storm. Two spirits unite to make a greater power." The wedding blanket settled over their shoulders as they knelt. Sarah spoke her vows in both languages, her heart too full for just one tongue. "I choose you before all others, through all seasons, in all worlds." James's reply was equally measured, equally true. "I bind my soul to yours, under these stars before all spirits." The settlers sang a hymn while the tribal members chanted a blessing. The sounds wove together, strange but beautiful, like the patterns in the blanket they shared. When it was done, when the last prayers faded, Sarah felt different. Not just married, transformed, as if the ceremony had remade her into something new, something stronger. "Look," James whispered. On the horizon, a herd of wild horses appeared, led by a paint stallion whose coat matched the sunrise. They paused, watching the gathering, then wheeled as one and galloped away. "A sign," Running Horse said. "The spirits show us the way. Strength in unity, beauty in difference." Peterson cleared his throat. "The territorial office will recognize this union," he said formally, "with full legal standing." It wasn't just a ceremony anymore. It was a beginning, a declaration, a promise. Later, as the celebrations began, Sarah found a moment alone with James. "We did it," she said, touching his cheek. He caught her hand, kissing her palm. "No more too old, no more too different, just us, making our own way." Dawn, bearing light and thunder, speaking softly, she said, loving how their tribal names felt together. Above them, the eagle feathers stirred in a warm breeze, blessing the first day of their new life, their new world, their new way forward. The threatening letter lay unfurled on James's desk, its anonymous scrawl ugly against clean paper. A white woman who lies with savages deserves a savage's death. Leave now or burn." Sarah traced the words, her finger catching on places where anger had pressed the pen too hard. "They left it nailed to my old homestead's door." James studied her face in the lamplight. 2 weeks of marriage had only strengthened her, adding a new confidence to her bearing. Now that confidence was tested, "We knew there would be resistance," he said quietly. "Resistance is one thing. This," she gestured at the letter, "they'll really do it, James. They'll burn us out." He touched the eagle feather in his hat, a habit she'd come to love. "Let them try. The army owes me favors. The territorial marshal can't be everywhere," Sarah finished. "And the tribal warriors can't patrol forever." Outside their window, the autumn wind carried distant sounds. Horses, laughter, life continuing despite threats. Their home blended both their ways, her books beside his medicine bundles, her quilts draped over his ceremonial chairs. Everything they'd built together could burn so easily. "I won't let fear rule us," James said, rising to stoke the fire. "We've fought too hard for this life." Sarah joined him at the hearth, remembering other fires, the ones that had almost claimed her during barrel racing, the ones that had warmed her in the tribal camp when she was sick, the sacred flames of their wedding ceremony. "Then we fight smarter," she said. "We use both our ways." James turned to her, firelight dancing in his eyes. "What are you thinking? The settlers fear what they don't understand. So we make them understand." She pulled out the property maps. "They'd used at the land office. We opened the trading post here on my old homestead. Not just goods, knowledge. Their children can learn tribal crafts. Your people can teach them about the land. And your people can teach ours about new farming methods," James added, catching her vision. "But the Jensens will look foolish, opposing progress." Sarah smiled grimly. "Especially when the army's new fort needs supplies. Who better to provide them than a trading post that bridges both worlds?" A horn sounded in the distance, the night watch warning of riders approaching. James reached for his gun, but Sarah caught his arm. "No, let me face them first, as your wife, as dawn-bearing light, as someone who knows their fears because I once shared them." They stepped onto the porch together. A group of settlers approached, led by younger men Sarah didn't recognize. Their faces were hard in the torchlight, their intentions clear in the way they gripped their rifles. But before they reached the house, another group emerged from the shadows, tribal warriors, silent and disciplined. And with them, unexpectedly, Mary Hansen and Peterson from the land office. "Evening," Peterson called out. "Seems we all had the same idea about night riding." His badge glinted meaningfully. "Though some of us are here legally." The settlers pulled up short, confronted by unity they hadn't expected. Mary Hansen stepped forward. "Go home, boys. Times are changing. Either change with them or get left behind. The territory's growing," Peterson added. "There's no room for the old hatreds anymore." The would-be attackers wavered, then turned back. As they rode away, Sarah felt James's arms slip around her waist. "Your people," he said softly, "defending us alongside mine." "Our people," Sarah corrected. "All of them." She looked at the mixing group, settlers, tribal members, officials, all choosing a new way forward. This is what they fear most. Not our marriage, but the proof that their fear is needless. Later, as their unexpected defenders shared coffee and stories around their fire, Sarah added the threatening letter to the flames. It curled and blackened, its hatred turned to ash, while love and courage blazed brighter. The first test wasn't over, but they'd passed its beginning, together. The winter storage cache Sarah had designed saved the tribe when the blizzards came early. While other camps struggled with spoiled food and frozen supplies, her blend of settler root cellars and tribal preservation methods kept their provisions safe and accessible. "Like this," she showed the younger women, demonstrating how to layer dried herbs with salt-cured meats. The settlers learned it from German immigrants. The salt and herbs worked together, keeping the meat good longer. Running Brook nodded approvingly. Your ways have wisdom too, she said, adding her own knowledge. We place sweetgrass between layers. It keeps evil spirits from spoiling the food. Outside, the wind howled like hungry wolves. 3 weeks of relentless storms had trapped many in their homes, but the tribe remained strong, adapted to the harsh realities of prairie winters. James entered their home, snow crusting his coat. 2 more families just arrived from the settler. "Au camp," he said, stamping his boots. Their food cellars collapsed in the frost. Sarah immediately began gathering supplies. The Hanson family and the Petersons. Mary Hanson's trying to keep her pride, but their children are hungry. In their storage cache, Sarah assembled provisions: dried beef, preserved vegetables, herbs for tea. She added extra, knowing Mary's struggle to accept help. "The old way would be to let them fend for themselves," Running Horse said from the doorway, watching her work. "They showed you no kindness in your time of need." Sarah straightened, meeting the elder's eyes. "The old way isn't always the right way. Isn't that what my marriage to James proves?" The elder smiled slightly. "You learn our wisdom well, dawn bearing light." When Sarah brought the supplies to the Hanson family, Mary's eyes filled with tears. "Why?" she whispered. "After how we treated you. Because hunger knows no color, no age, no prejudice." Sarah replied, helping Mary store the food properly. "Because survival is easier together than apart." The storms continued, but something else spread through the community. Understanding. Settler women learned tribal methods of preserving food, while tribal women adapted settler techniques for their own use. In the shared struggle against winter's fury, barriers began to thaw. One particularly bitter night, as Sarah and James lay wrapped in the wedding blanket, she asked, "Do you think it will last, this peace born of necessity?" James pulled her closer. "You lasted. You changed. Others can too." A commotion outside interrupted them. Shouting urgent voices, they rushed to dress. "Fire at the Jensen place," a warrior reported. "Their chimney caught in the storm." Without hesitation, Sarah began organizing. "Get the women's medicine bundles," she ordered. "Frostbite will be as dangerous as burns. James will need the strongest riders." Through near-blinding snow, they rode out. The Jensen home was almost invisible in the storm, marked only by desperate flames eating through the roof. Sarah saw Sam Jensen struggling with a bucket line, his face ashen, his hatred of her marriage, his threats, his prejudice. None of it mattered now. "Get those children in here," she shouted over the wind, directing the families toward waiting horses. "The tribe's council house can hold everyone." For once, Jensen didn't argue. His wife was already accepting a blanket from Running Brook, clutching their youngest child close. Hours later, as the combined efforts of settlers and tribal members saved what they could of the Jensen home, Sarah served coffee to the exhausted workers. The council house was crowded with both peoples, children of all colors playing together while adults shared warmth and stories. "Never thought I'd see this," Mary Blackhawk said softly, watching Sam Jensen accept a bowl of tribal healing soup from Running Horse himself. "Survival teaches better than words," Sarah replied. "Thomas used to say that." She touched her locket, then the eagle feather James had given her to wear, symbols of her past and present. Outside, the storm raged on, but within the council house, a different kind of warmth spread. Spring would come eventually, and when it did, perhaps more than just the land would have been transformed by winter's harsh lessons. Sarah's journal lay open on her lap as her wagon approached the settlement, its pages filled with the story of her transformation. She'd started writing during those first desperate days of widowhood, never imagining how her tale would evolve. "Ready?" James asked from beside her. He'd chosen to wear his formal chief's attire, making no concessions to settler sensibilities. The eagle feather caught the spring sunlight, proud and defiant. "Ready," Sarah replied, closing the journal. She too had chosen her appearance carefully, a blend of settler dress and tribal adornments, her new identity written in every detail. The settlement had grown during her absence. New buildings lined the main street, including a proper courthouse where the old livery stable had been. But some things remained unchanged, like the stares that followed their wagon, the whispers that rippled in their wake. They pulled up in front of Hanson's general store, where Sarah had once been turned away in her hour of need. Mary Hanson stood in the doorway, her face a complex mixture of emotions. "Welcome to town, Chief Blackwood," she said formally, then softer. "Sarah." "Mary." Sarah descended from the wagon, her beaded dress catching the light. "We've come to arrange trade agreements. The Army's new fort will need supplies." More. Faces appeared in doorways and windows. Sarah recognized them all, the people who had judged her too old, too useless, too much of a burden. Now she stood before them as dawn-bearing light, wife of a chief, survivor of the winter that had humbled them all. "The council chamber is ready," Peterson called from the courthouse steps. "Representatives from the fort are waiting." James offered Sarah his arm, and they walked together through the parting crowd. She heard the murmurs, saw the recognition. In their eyes, this was not the desperate widow they had cast aside. In the council chamber, Sarah opened her journal, using her careful records of winter trading to support their proposals. The Army representatives leaned forward, interested in her unique perspective on both communities' capabilities. Mrs. Blackwood's experience with both settler and tribal methods gives her unique insight, Peterson noted, using her new name naturally. "Dawn-bearing light," James corrected quietly. "She earned her tribal name as she earned her place among us." The meeting proceeded smoothly until Sam Jensen burst in, his face flushed. "This is an abomination. Taking orders from Indians and They're what, Sam?" Sarah's voice cut through his bluster. "They're perfectly legal representatives, their chief, who saved your family from freezing? Or perhaps you mean me, the woman your community left to starve, who now helps manage the largest trading network in the territory?" Jensen faltered, looking around for support he didn't find. The winter had changed too much, even his own. Sons looked away, remembering the night their home had burned, and the tribe had offered shelter. "The territory is changing," the Army captain said into the silence. "We need cooperation, not conflict. Chief Blackwood, Mrs. Dawn-bearing light, your proposal is accepted." As they left the courthouse, Sarah noticed something unexpected. Children playing together in the street, settler and tribal alike. Near the general store, women from both communities examined trade goods, sharing knowledge of their uses. "Look," she said to James, gesturing to her journal, "this is what I've been writing about. Not just my story, but the story of change." "Our story," he corrected, helping her into the wagon. "The story of two worlds becoming one." They were nearly at the edge of town when Sarah heard running feet. She turned to see Mary Hanson approaching, something clutched in her hands. "I saved this," Mary said, holding out a faded blue ribbon. "From the last barrel race you won. I thought your children might want to know their mother was champion before she became a chief's wife." Sarah took the ribbon, touching it to the journal's pages. "They'll know all of it, Mary. The hard times and the good, the hatred and the healing, everything that made me who I am." As they rode away, Sarah looked back one last time at the settlement that had once rejected her. It seemed smaller now, less powerful, not because it had changed, but because she had. "You've won them over," James said softly. "No," Sarah replied, opening her journal to a fresh page. "We've won them over. With every act of kindness, every shared hardship, every bridge built between worlds. The spring wind carried the scent of new growth, new possibilities." Sarah began to write. The Trading Post ledger told a story of its own. Each careful entry in Sarah's handwriting showed the growing ties between two peoples. Deerskin traded for cotton cloth, tribal medicines exchanged for settler tools, knowledge flowing both ways, like the river that connected their lands. "These profit margins are impressive," Peterson said, reviewing the quarterly accounts. "The Army contract alone is only the beginning," Sarah finished, turning the ledger's pages. "Look at the civilian trade growth. Every month, more settlers are choosing to trade with us instead of waiting for the eastern supply wagons. The trading post itself reflected their success. Built on Sarah's old homestead, it incorporated both settler and tribal architecture, solid wooden walls rising to a traditional peaked roof decorated with tribal symbols. Inside, James was teaching a group of settler children about tribal sign language, while their mothers learned preservation techniques from Mary Blackhawk. Some said it couldn't work, Peterson mused. A chief's wife running a trading post, mixing both worlds. But you've proved them wrong. Sarah smiled, remembering the early days of struggle. We had help. Mary Hanson's influence with the settler wives, your legal support, the army captain's endorsement, even the Jensen boys started coming around once they saw the profits in cooperation. The afternoon sun streamed through windows, illuminating displays of tribal crafts alongside settler goods. Sarah had insisted on fair prices and honest dealings from the start, building trust through transparency. The ledger recorded every transaction, every exchange of not just goods, but goodwill. Chief Blackwood, a young settler woman, called from the doorway. The medicine woman says the herbs are ready for trading. James excused himself from the children's lesson. Sarah, you'll want to see this. Running Brook has been experimenting with your suggestions. They went outside to where Running Brook had set up her healing station. The old medicine woman had combined tribal healing herbs with settler garden plants, creating new remedies that drew curious visitors from both communities. The fever bark works better when mixed with settler peppermint, Running Brook explained to her audience. Two medicines become stronger together like two peoples. Sarah noted the metaphor's effect on her listeners. Even Sam Jensen's wife nodded thoughtfully, her hand resting on a jar of the mixed medicine that had helped her youngest through the winter. A commotion at the trading post entrance drew their attention. A group of army scouts rode up, their expressions urgent. Raiding party spotted, their leader reported, moving towards settler territories from the south. Not our tribe, he added quickly, seeing the tension rise. Renegades from downriver. Sarah watched the gathered crowd, seeing old fears and prejudices threaten to resurface. But before anyone could speak, Sam Jensen's oldest boy stepped forward. We'll help defend the settlements, he said to James, if you'll teach us your tracking methods. And we'll shelter everyone in the trading post if needed, Sarah added. It's built strong, with clear lines of sight. James nodded approvingly. Two peoples defending together, better than either alone. The next hours saw an unprecedented cooperation. Tribal warriors taught settler men their defensive techniques, while settler women helped tribal families move their valuables into the trading post's stone-walled storeroom. Children from both communities were gathered inside, their mothers working together to keep them calm and occupied. Sarah added a new page to the ledger, recording not goods, but shared strength. Tribal warriors and settler men riding out together, women of both peoples organizing supplies, Peterson coordinating with army scouts using tribal signal methods. You've built more than a trading post, Mary Hanson said, joining Sarah at her desk. You've built a future. Looking around at the mixed group taking shelter in the post she and James had created, Sarah felt the truth of those words. The ledger showed more than profits. It showed prejudice giving way to partnership, fear transformed into friendship. The real test, she said, will be what remains after the danger passes. Will they remember this unity? They'll remember, James said, pausing to kiss her before riding out with the defense party, because we'll keep reminding them. Every trade, every shared meal, every child who grows up seeing two peoples as one. Sarah touched her silver locket, then the eagle feather she now wore in her hair. Two streams joining to make a mighty river, she quoted from their wedding ceremony. The ledger lay open before her, ready to record whatever came next in the story of their joined peoples. The blood-stained shawl lay on Sarah's desk, its delicate pattern marred by violence. Mary Hanson had worn it to the trading post that morning before the riders came. Now it served as a stark reminder of how quickly peace could shatter. 6. Wounded, James reported, his voice tight with controlled anger. 2 of our warriors, 4 settlers. No deaths, thanks to Running Brook's quick work. Sarah touched the shawl, her fingers trembling. Did you recognize them? The attackers? Some. James paced their office, the eagle feather quivering with his tension. Jensen's cousins from the South Territory. Men who fought against tribal. Rights before. They came prepared, Sarah. This wasn't spontaneous. Outside, they could hear both communities gathering. Tribal members and settlers alike, drawn together by the attack on their trading post. The raiders had struck during the busiest trading hour, seemingly intent on destroying more than just property. They didn't expect us to defend each other, Mary Blackhawk said from the doorway, her sleeve torn from bandaging wounds. They thought, if fear would divide us. Sarah stood, squaring her shoulders. Then let's show them how wrong they were. She walked out to face the crowd, James at her side. The trading post's walls bore bullet marks, but it stood strong, like the relationships they'd built over the past year. Sam Jensen pushed through the gathering, his face dark with shame. Those were my kin that did this, he said gruffly. But they ain't welcome here anymore. We've built something worth protecting. A murmur of agreement rose from both settlers and tribal members. Sarah saw Running Brook treating a settler child's scrapes while the girl's mother held medicines for her. Nearby, tribal warriors and settler men discussed strengthening their joint patrols. Then a shot rang out. Sarah felt the bullet pass close enough to stir her hair before James pulled her down. More riders appeared at the trading post's edges. A larger force this time, led by a face she recognized from Jensen family gatherings. "This ends today," the leader shouted. "We won't let Indian lovers and savages corrupt our territory." But before he could fire again, something remarkable happened. The gathered crowd didn't scatter in fear. Instead, they moved as one, settlers and tribal members forming a living barrier around the trading post. "You're too late, Joshua," Sam Jensen called to his cousin. "You can't break what's already grown strong together." "Listen to him," Sarah added, standing despite James's protective grip. "Look around you. Children of both peoples learning together. Women sharing medicines that save lives. Men working side by side. Would you destroy all this just to keep your hatred?" "It's against nature," Joshua spat. "Whites and Indians mixing, trading, marrying. A chief's whore teaching our children savage ways." Multiple guns cocked at once, but not just tribal weapons. Settler men stood ready too, defending Sarah's honor, defending their new way of life. "That's my friend you're insulting," Mary Hansen said clearly, her bloody shawl now a badge of courage. "That's our teacher, our healer, our bridge between worlds." The army patrol riding in was almost unnecessary. Joshua and his men found themselves surrounded not by enemies divided, but by communities united. "Drop your weapons," James commanded, every inch the chief, "or learn how two peoples fight as one." The raiders hesitated, then slowly lowered their guns. As the army led them away, Sarah looked at the trading post, bullet-scarred but unbowed, like their marriage, their communities, their shared future. "We need to talk about expanding," Peterson said later, surveying the damage. "Army captain says he can get us funds for a proper fortified trading station. After this, he sees the value in a strong combined settlement." Sarah collected Mary's bloody shawl, thinking how to clean it. "Not just fortified," she said. "Beautiful too, with a school that teaches both ways, a healing house that uses both medicines. A place," James added, "where no one is too old or too different to belong." As the sun set, the mixed community worked together to repair the trading post. Sarah watched settler children helping to gather tribal medicines that had spilled, tribal women teaching settler girls to weave stronger walls, men of both peoples planning better defenses. The blood-stained shawl would be kept as a reminder, she decided, not of violence, but of the day their unity proved stronger than hatred. The peace pipe passed from hand to hand during the reconciliation ceremony, its carved surface worn smooth by generations of use. Sarah watched as settler and tribal leaders took turns sharing the sacred tobacco, each puff of smoke carrying prayers. for continued unity. Our grandfathers would not believe their eyes, Running Horse murmured, seated beside her. Whites and tribal people sharing the pipe of peace, meaning it truly. In the month since the attack, walls had fallen faster than they could repair the trading post's bullet holes. Sam Jensen sat among the tribal elders, his face solemn as he learned their protocols. His wife had begun studying with Running Brook, bringing other settler women to learn tribal healing ways. "We are not enemies sharing peace," James addressed, the gathering standing tall in his chief's regalia. "We are one people sharing life." He switched smoothly between English and his tribal tongue, his words bridging worlds as naturally as breathing. The army captain nodded approvingly from his place in the circle. The trading post's success had drawn attention from territorial authorities, bringing offers of support for their unified settlement experiment. "The governor himself is interested," Peterson added when the pipe reached him. "Says this could be a model for other territories. Peace through trade, understanding through daily contact." Sarah remembered Thomas's dream of cooperation, touching the locket that still held his picture. "He would have loved this," she whispered to James. "He helped build it," James replied softly. "His love for this land, his respect for our people, it lived on in you. You carried it forward, made it grow into something new." The ceremony continued as dusk approached. Children played together nearby, their laughter a counterpoint to the serious proceedings. Sarah noticed they had created their own games, blending settler and tribal elements naturally. Mary Hanson rose to speak, still wearing her mended shawl like a badge of honor. "A year ago, I thought Sarah was throwing her life away, choosing to live among the tribe. Now I understand she wasn't choosing sides. She was showing us how to make the sides disappear." Running Brook added her own wisdom. "When two streams join, you cannot say which water is which. They become one river, stronger together." As darkness fell, both peoples shared a feast. Sarah watched settler women praising tribal dishes while tribal children begged for settler desserts. The night air filled with both languages, people switching easily between them. "Look," James said, directing her attention to where young couples sat together. Tribal warriors and settler girls, settler men and tribal women, following the path Sarah and James had blazed. The peace pipe made its final round, coming to Sarah. As dawn-bearing light, wife of the chief, she had earned the right to share in sacred ceremonies. She took her puff thoughtfully, sending her own prayers into the smoke. "What did you pray for?" James asked later, as they walked home under stars that shone on all people equally. "For the courage to keep building," she replied. "For wisdom to teach the children this new way of living. For strength to face whatever comes next." He touched the eagle feather in his hat, then the one she wore. "My father's spirit guides us well. He saw this coming, I think. Why else would he send me to Eastern schools, teach me to walk in both worlds?" Sarah thought of her own journey, from champion barrel racer to desperate widow to bridge between peoples. Sometimes the hardest trails lead to the best destinations. They paused at their door, looking back at the lights of the growing settlement. Somewhere in the night, a tribal drum began to play, and a settler's fiddle joined in. The music should have clashed, but instead it wove together into something hauntingly beautiful. "Tomorrow," Sarah said, "we start planning the school. Running Brook will teach tribal medicine while Mary Hanson teaches reading. Peterson says the territorial government will help fund it." James pulled her close. "Tomorrow is full of possibilities, but tonight—" He traced the silver threads, now beginning to show in her hair. "Tonight, we celebrate how far we've come." The peace pipe smoke lingered in the air, carrying the hopes of two peoples becoming one. Sarah touched her locket, then reached for her husband's hand. They had built this peace together, and together they would make it last. The new homestead plans spread across the trading post's main table, their careful drawings showing a future neither people could have imagined 2 years ago. A proper town would rise here, with the trading post at its heart, but not just Any town. The school here, Sarah pointed out to the Territorial Planning Committee, built in a circle, like tribal council houses, but with settler-style windows for good light. Tribal and settler teachers working together. The committee members leaned forward, intrigued. These weren't the same officials who had once ignored her plight. These men had ridden 3 days to see the Blackwood settlement miracle for themselves. And the success rate of this integrated approach, one asked, scratching notes. Our traders doubled profits this year, James replied. But more importantly, we haven't lost a single family to winter hardship or disease since combining our knowledge. 2 medicines, 2 ways of farming, 2 types of construction, all working together. Through the window, Sarah watched young couples walking together, more and more of them mixed pairs, following her and James's example. Love, it seemed, cared little for old boundaries once they were shown to be imaginary. The governor is particularly interested in your justice system, another committeeman said. This blend of tribal council and settler law? It works because we respect both ways, Sarah explained. Tribal wisdom for tribal matters, settler law for settler issues, and both together for anything that affects us all. Peterson helps ensure everything stays legal by territorial standards. Speaking of Peterson, James added with a smile, his daughter is engaged to one of our warriors. Fine young man, educated in both traditions. The committee exchanged glances. A territorial official's daughter marrying a tribal warrior. It would have seemed impossible 2 years ago, but Sarah and James had shown the way, proved it could work. Tell us about the school, one man urged. The governor's particularly interested in that. Sarah's heart warmed. The school was her pride, her gift to the future. We teach both languages, both histories, both ways of seeing the world. The children learn to read and write English, but also to speak the tribal tongue and understand sacred stories. They learn settler mathematics alongside tribal star knowledge. And the parents approve? See for yourself, James suggested. He led them outside, where the afternoon lessons were taking place under the open sky. Settler and tribal children sat together, learning to make pemmican from Mary Blackhawk, while a young settler woman taught them to calculate the trading values of different goods. They're growing up without our old fears, Sarah said softly. Without our old hatreds. They don't see 2 peoples, they just see friends, neighbors, community. The committee watched as a tribal girl helped a settler boy with his calculations, while he showed her a better way to mix the pemmican ingredients. Natural cooperation, untainted by prejudice. The governor believes your settlement could be a model for the whole territory, the head committeeman said finally. Perhaps beyond, would you be willing to host other leaders, show them how you've made this work? Sarah and James exchanged glances. They'd dreamed of change, but hadn't imagined becoming teachers to the territory itself. Tell the governor, yes, James said, but they must come ready to learn from both peoples, both ways. And they must understand, Sarah added, that this wasn't built overnight. It grew from hardship, from necessity, from people learning to see past their fears to the humanity in each other. Later, after the committee left with their detailed reports and drawings, Sarah stood at the trading post door. The setting sun painted the growing settlement in shades of gold. What had begun as her desperate homestead was becoming a true community, a place where old wounds could heal and new bonds could form. Thinking deep thoughts? James asked, coming up behind her. Thinking about Thomas, she said honestly, about how loss led to love, how ending led to beginning. He wrapped his arms around her, and together they watched their legacy unfold. Children playing tribal games with settler toys, women exchanging recipes and medicines, men planning hunting parties that would use both people's skills. We'll need to expand again, James mused. More families coming every month, drawn by what they've heard. Sarah touched her silver locket, then reached for his hand. Let them come. We'll show them all what's possible when love proves stronger than fear. The sun set on their settlement, their miracle, their legacy to a changing world. The family portrait captured everything they'd built. Sarah and James stood at its center, her silver-streaked hair adorned with an eagle feather matching his own. Around them gathered their expanding family, not just children of their blood, but all the young ones they'd helped guide into this new way of living. "Perfect timing," Peterson said, studying the photograph in the bright spring sunshine. "The governor's coming next week to officially recognize Blackwood Settlement as the territory's first fully integrated town." Sarah touched the portrait gently. A year had brought so many changes. Peterson's daughter now wore tribal braids as she taught at their school, while her warrior husband had become the settlement's best negotiator with Eastern traders. Sam Jensen's oldest son was courting a tribal chief's daughter from the north, proving their path could be followed. "Remember when they called me too old?" Sarah mused, watching children play in the schoolyard. Tribal and settler little ones learning double dutch alongside traditional hoop games. "Now they call me elder, and it's a mark of respect." James squeezed her hand. "You earned that respect, we all did." The settlement had grown beyond their dreams. The trading post now anchored a thriving main street where tribal crafts shared space with settler goods. The healing house combined both medicines, drawing patients from across the territory. Their school had become a model for other settlements, its methods studied and copied. But it was more than just buildings and institutions. It was the way people lived now, naturally flowing between languages, customs, and ways of thinking. It was tribal drums playing alongside settler fiddles at celebrations, sacred ceremonies attended by all, shared feasts that blended both people's foods. "Chief Blackwood!" a young rider approached at a gallop. "Riders coming, at least 50!" Sarah felt James tense beside her, but these weren't raiders. Through her brass spyglass, she saw families in wagons, tribal people on horseback. More settlers drawn by tales of their miracle. "I'll alert the welcome committee," Peterson said, hurrying off. The welcome committee, another change. Instead of fear and suspicion, newcomers now found guidance and acceptance. Tribal elders and settler leaders would meet them together, explaining how their community worked, helping them find their place in this new way of living. "They're coming faster now," James observed. Ever since the governor's first visit, Sarah watched the dust of approaching wagons blend with the riders' hoofprints. "They're coming because we've proved it's possible. Not just survival, but thriving. Not just tolerance, but true belonging." She touched her silver locket, then looked at the portrait again. So much of their story was captured there. In the proud way James wore both his chief's regalia and his Eastern education, in the natural way settler and tribal children clustered. Around them, in her own face showing the wisdom earned through years of bridging worlds. The settlement spread before them, a living testament to what love could build. The old homestead where she'd once faced starvation now hosted harvest festivals, where all shared in nature's bounty. The barn where she'd clutched Thomas's rifle, in desperate defense, now stabled horses for shared hunting parties. "Shall we greet them together?" James asked as the riders drew closer. Sarah smiled, remembering other arrivals, other beginnings. "Together," she agreed, "always together." They walked down the main street of their miracle, past the school where two ways of learning made children stronger, past the healing house where two medicines saved more lives than one alone could do, past the trading post where fair exchange had built trust and prosperity. At the settlement's edge they stopped. Sarah felt the warmth of the eagle feather in her hair, the weight of her silver locket, the strength of James's hand in hers. Behind them stood their people, not tribal, not settler, but something new, something stronger. The first wagon crested the rise. "Welcome," Sarah called out in both languages, her voice carrying the authority of one who had lived the change she taught. "Welcome to Blackwood Settlement, where no one is too old, too different, or too anything to belong." The sun blessed them all equally as a new chapter began.